In Nigeria, a suicide bomber has driven a car packed with explosives into a busy bus station in the northeastern town of Potiskum, killing 4 people and wounding 35 others. The wounded were rushed to hospital as people gathered around the scene of the attack, only to find a charred vehicle and debris scattered along the ground. There was no immediate claim to responsibility for the attack, but it bore the hallmarks of the group Boko Haram and adds to the country's growing security concerns ahead of the closely fought presidential vote this month. The attack comes as President Idris Deby of Chad met the first contingent of Chadian troops who were deploying to neighbouring Cameroon to assist in the fight against Boko Haram in that region. The reporter on state TV said they had left on Saturday morning to join troops from Cameroon and Nigeria to fight the Boko Haram insurgents, who have killed thousands over the last year. Nathaniel Emasansum, The Report.
Well, joining me here in the studio to discuss the battle against Boko Haram is James Schneider, who's editorial director at the New African magazine. James, welcome. We've covered this story a number of times. Is this a talk of more troops from other countries? Is this liable to be a significant change in the situation?
It's a development, but it's not hugely significant given that there was already cooperation between Niger, Chad, Cameroon and Nigeria beforehand. I think this will be stepped up somewhat. Chad plays a sort of regional role across the Sahel as a kind of counter-terror entity. And it looks like they're taking the opportunity to extend that, but it's not entirely new. I mean, for example, the military base that was attacked at Baga at the beginning of the Baga massacre was a multinational joint task force from those 4 countries I just mentioned.
So do you think that when this happens, I mean, we've been at points like this in other conflicts, and it looks good at this point. It looks as if maybe this will make a difference. And then, you know, some months maybe down the road, it turns into blowback. It turns into the spread of terrorism, not the eradication of it. Any danger of that here?
There's perhaps some danger that Boko Haram will attempt terrorist attacks as opposed to sort of insurgency attacks where they go into a town or a village and they kidnap and try to kill people, but sort of bombings in Chadian cities away from right on the border with Nigeria where Boko Haram currently operate. There is some danger of that, but if they wish to deal with this threat, which is slightly inside their border, this is what they're going to have to do. I mean, Boko Haram, whilst it's being framed in some ways as a regional threat, is really basically operates in the Kanuri-speaking areas of Nigeria, Niger, Chad, and Cameroon, and it's that region as opposed to something which could probably spread further into Chad. Although, of course, there is some risk for the Chadians of Boko Haram sort of counter-attacking further. As we've seen, Abu Bakr Shakal, their leader, has threatened to attack much further into Cameroon, much deeper into Cameroon than they have so far.
And what do you think is liable to happen with, I mean, we're used to sort of thinking in terms of endings. Will this be a turning point? Will new troops finish them off? Can the Nigerian government get itself together to crush them? But what if none of those things happen? Is there a sense in which it could sort of settle down into just holding territory as a kind of sub-state actor?
I don't think so. This is not an ending, and I don't think we're going to see a sort of a simmering down. I mean, Boko Haram looked like they're trying to hold some territory, but it doesn't. They seem to be quite willing to give and take territory. They launch a very large number of attacks in territories that are not contiguous with the bits which they hold. They don't really seem to have huge amounts of interest in governance, in practicing what they're preaching in a sort of territorially controlled area. So
not even in the kind of brutal sense that the
So they're not mimicking the Islamic State like that. They have mentioned setting up an emirate, but there doesn't really seem to be so they're setting up any sort of civilian or religious authority. They're very much a military and terrorist movement at this point.
I mean, there's been a question certainly all over social media about the differential reporting of the Paris attack and the Boko Haram attacks. The Boko Haram attacks, of course, killing far more people. What do you make of the media response?
I think everyone's rightful to be critical, and it's very clear that the international media and global leadership places far more value on what goes on in Paris than what goes on in very remote northeast Nigeria. There are some mitigating circumstances in how difficult it is to get news out from the area, but I mean fundamentally that critique stands. But it should also focused quite firmly, I think, on the Nigerian national leadership, where Goodluck Jonathan, the president, released a statement about the attack on Charlie Hebdo, calling them dastardly, long before any comment was made by any member of his administration or the military about the ongoing massacre in Baga.
Staggering. James Schneider from New African magazine, thanks very much. Afraid we'll have to leave the discussion there, though. But before we take a break, let's have a look at what you've been saying on Twitter. @Halajaba tweets about a new channel being launched by the Islamic State, saying that ISIS will be launching a 24/7 TV news channel broadcasting only propaganda, including a new series by British captive John Cantley. @Ken Roth, that's from the Human Rights Watch, tweets about freedom of expression, saying, having just celebrated freedom of expression, France starts prosecuting people for the vague crime of glorifying terrorism. On the subject of how freedom of expression manifests itself in France, The Independent tweeted a poll which revealed nearly half of French people oppose the Mohammed cartoons. In one final tweet using the hashtag #WhoIsMohammed, which started trending last week, @Northwest FOP tweeted a picture of Muslims helping non-Muslims in the snow here in the UK. They said, "This is Islam." Do stay with us for our last segment, where we'll be taking a look at the rise in Islamophobia here in the UK following the Paris attacks almost 2 weeks ago. See you after the break.